We have identified that every dollar invested into commit is a $4 return on the U.S. economy.
Welcome to the Values Exchange podcast. I'm Mike Cruz, your host, author of Saturday Every Day, private pilot, and CEO of North Texas Wealth Management, a firm dedicated to values-based financial planning. Today, we're talking about purpose after the uniform. After someone leaves military service, it raises a profound question. Who are you without the uniform? Many struggle with their identity, and today we have a special guest to discuss the Commit Foundation. He's the CEO of the Commit Foundation, retired Army Ranger with 20 years of service, 7 of those years as a Ranger, which included 11 deployments, combat deployments. He's worked with Fortune 500 companies, international nonprofits, government agencies, professional sports teams across the NFL and NBA. He's authored 2 books, delivered a TEDx talk on leadership, adjunct professor at St. John's University, a Liberty Fellow with Aspen Institute, and a doctoral candidate at Columbia University. And now he helps veterans navigate their transition journey from military to civilian life. With me today, JC Glick. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So one of my former guests on the Values Exchange, Mimi Bach, talked about her survival and 9/11 attacks, and her experience there, but also, about gratitude. And she said, Mike, you got to have JC on the Values Exchange. So I'm so glad you're here today. And just wanted to kind of understand your entire personal journey that got you here to be the CEO of the Commit Foundation. And maybe you can even talk about what is the Commit Foundation?
So, the Commit Foundation is set up to empower veterans, their families, and now we've opened it up to even members of the intelligence community to help them find identity, purpose, and community after service. Right? I think that, and I don't think this is unique to the military or to government service, but I think that if you do something for a period of time and you identify with that profession, I think identity, purpose, and community are rolled up into that profession, whether you're in finance, the military, law enforcement, whatever it is. I think that you become what you do. And it's all encompassing. And I think that in a second chapter, when that ends, how do you find out, okay, well, who are you now? What's your purpose now? And who are your people? And again, when we go to work, our people are given to us. Our community is kind of like, here's your community. And when we go to find that next role, we have to find our community. And I think that's what, we really help, is help, high potential individuals, find identity, purpose, and community after the uniform comes off.
Yeah. And I imagine, like you said, even working with maybe the NFL and these high performers and, that's who you are, that's who you become. And then all of a sudden you're no longer either in the military or part of the NFL or, professional athlete. Now who am I or, what am I? And how do you kind of break that down? If we kind of go back in time, all these deployments, Army Ranger, of course, that's your identity. What was that personal journey for you? What did you specifically struggle with as you made that transition?
Yeah, I will tell you that my first struggle was I went from being deployed all that time to moving to a command where I wouldn't deploy at all. And it was 18 months after I went into that command that I had my first of 4 suicide attempts, because I wasn't like, what am I now? I'm not a Ranger. I'm not an operator. I'm like, what am I? Like, because I didn't identify with being a lieutenant colonel or a battalion commander. Like, that wasn't who I was. I was this other thing that I wasn't anymore. My people were all still over there. These were new people. I didn't know them. I hadn't spent a whole bunch of time with them. And, I think we have a grandiose idea of what our purpose is back then, where, it was support and defend the Constitution of the United States, right? Okay, well, that's a pretty darn big purpose. And I think we aggrandize it a little bit. And so I leave that, and then I leave service. And everybody talks about veterans having jobs. Um, every veteran can get out tomorrow and have a job. The problem is that we have the highest underemployment rate of any demographic at 33%. That's a problem. And we are most likely to leave our first role after the military 12 to 18 months after assuming that role. And that's because we haven't done the work on identity, purpose, and community. And so I got out and I was doing well, right? I was lucky enough to get a partner position in a well-established consulting company. My first book came out, was adopted by the NFL and by Microsoft. Like, on paper, people went, "Oh, he's killing it."
Yeah.
I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what my purpose was. And I ran so fast and far away from the gun club that, because I wanted to prove I could be successful outside of it. I was really struggling. It took me time. And what I think I most enjoy about Commit is, if as a society we're supposed to get iteratively better, I can take kind of the lessons I've learned over 10 years, and we can shorten that so that, we really focus deliberately on identity first.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Then we start to talk about purpose, and we provide community. And it's a very deliberate process that, we can take lessons learned, and hopefully, this is what, I think the hope is for Commit, is that we continue to shorten that length of time where people are going through transformation, not transition. And we don't have those huge valleys that happen for so many veterans. And quite honestly, athletes, we've identified that our process will work for multiple demographics, and we're going to try to provide support for those demographics as well.
Sure. No, that's great. And, I appreciate the vulnerability of bringing up, attempted suicide. And I kind of want to go back to that, and just that if someone's listening or watching, I kind of want to break that down, and that, what were you feeling at that time? What were you telling yourself that got you to that point where you felt like that was the only way out?
So it wasn't a way out. It was a solution to a problem, and I was the problem.
Okay.
I was very angry all the time. I was I was not a good husband. I was not a good partner. If I was doing anything right, it was being a dad, but probably not doing that as well as I could have either. And to me, when I looked around and I was making everybody miserable, well, you solve the problem, right? Humans are problem solvers. We want to create a solution. I was the problem. So it wasn't about escapism for me. It wasn't like, I didn't feel like, oh, poor me, I feel bad. For me, it was, oh, I am a jerk. And I use different words. I am not a good person. And I'm clearly jacked up. And I'm making life really bad for all these people. This is how I solve that problem. Yeah. If I'm the problem, I can solve this problem.
Yeah. So someone that's listening and feeling the exact same way, they're, that disconnected, they're frustrated, they're angry, and they're like, I'm the problem. How do you go about reversing that psychology, that mental path of feeling that way? What would be your advice to them to say, time out, let's think of this differently?
I think that I think that it goes. I think you have to be a strategic thinker in those moments, right?
Okay.
And and to a certain extent, I'm going to tell you that we put a lot of onus on that person, right? I mean, and I understand the idea. I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was Dak Prescott, who, wore on his wristband like "ask for help." But here's the problem: you're asking somebody who's probably in their worst mindset ever to make a good decision. I didn't make any good decisions.
Yeah.
I lived a very risky lifestyle. I was taking unnecessary risks. I was not making good decisions. Don't ask me, don't expect me to ask for help and make a good decision. I mean, we've told, we tell our children to be self-sufficient, to be self-reliant. Well, except in this one situation.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that's really hard to do. I'd say the first step has to be, this is a community issue. This isn't an individual issue.
Mm-hmm.
And when we see, and had somebody said to me, "Are you okay? Are you thinking about hurting yourself?" Which, God, I mean, no one asked me.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. It's considered an uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah.
But it's certainly more comfortable than any other alternative, that conversation you might have afterwards.
Right.
So I think the first thing is a community. If you're not that person who's in trouble, you've got to be open with, "Hey, what's going on? Are you thinking about hurting yourself?" And being, maybe a little bit invasive into that person. Like, "No, this doesn't seem right." Like, and I don't, I want you to do it kindly, but I think you have to be a little pushy.
Mm-hmm.
For the individual, I think what it took with me is, a couple of different things. I think if you're in that spot there, that is a solution. I can't say that's not a solution, but it's only one solution. How many other solutions could there be?
Yeah.
Right. And I think you have to be an active participant in your recovery. And, I will tell you, I shopped for the right psychiatrist. Like, I shopped for the right doctor, because like, I was like, "Nope, don't like this. Nope, don't like this. Hey, I don't want to be on all these medications."
Yeah.
I see, I was on 24 different medications at one point.
Oh, wow.
I'm now on one. And here's the deal. I'm okay with that because I take creatine every day, because it's a supplement. That pill connects some synapses in my brain. That it's a supplement. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And that's how I see it, right? I don't say like, "Oh, I gotta take a medication." No, I take a supplement because my body needs it. And I found a psych who would be a partner with me in this, right? Because I think we look at, you break your arm, people are like, "Oh, you broke your arm." It's not a big like, "Ooh," it's like, we understand it. But you have something going on in your brain and people like immediately freak out. And well, no, there's a physiology to this. And I think the last thing is, I think, and again, this is the community side of it. My ex-wife is a wonderful person. Like, she is amazing. And she supported me my entire military career. However, support when you're not in your best place does not look like agreement all the time. Sometimes support's got to be like, "Hey, this is not okay. This behavior is not okay." And I will say that, I remarried. Again, I've somehow won the lottery twice with two great women. But the one that I have now, support is clearly not just, "Hey, I'm a great guy, you're always doing everything right." It's like, "Hey, I need to be called on my stuff." And I think that's important. I think we tend to like see people in crisis and think like, "Oh, we have to take care of them. We have to protect it." Well, no, we have to help them become resilient.
Okay.
And sometimes, I'm not saying give them a kick in the butt all the time, but sometimes I needed a kick in the butt.
Yeah. So kind of those healthy boundaries, call you out when you're outside the lines, and, kind of get you back on track of actually getting the help you need, and
Yeah.
not being afraid to raise those questions, which is, a lot of times, I see somebody in that situation. I mean, I'll be first to admit, I don't know what to say, right? And so I may not say anything. And I can tell you right now, the first thing out of my mouth wouldn't be like, hey, I'm worried about you. Are you thinking about hurting yourself? I would never have said that until you just told me that's probably what I should have said.
Yeah. And I think, and you can critique an action and not the actor, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can say like, hey, don't like this behavior without saying I don't like you.
Yeah.
And I think we're afraid to do that. And I think
Yeah.
we're afraid. What's the worst thing that happens to us if we say, hey, you're thinking about hurting yourself? The person says, no. Okay, great. I'm wrong. I love being wrong on that question.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to be right. Yeah. But if so, then you can lend, that support and listen and be that community until you get them maybe the right, like you said, doctors, resources and everything else that it takes to, find that mental resilience and new purpose and
Yep.
identity. No, it's a really powerful idea and thought because, I don't know if the statistic is right, but I know we lose a lot of military folks after they've deployed, after they come home, not actually in battle. It's there's a higher suicide rate, and it's a real problem that society needs to face. And I always kind of look at it in that you have basic training to get you all the way where you need to be in the military, but then when it's time to be released from the military, there's no training to get you back out of the military. And so, we're seeing the effects of that for sure.
Well, think about this. So the shortest basic training is 8 weeks, and that's the Air Force. And the least money that they spend is about $55,000 a person. Okay. And that's the Army. And that transforms you from a civilian into a warrior. When you get out, you get 2 days and it's $800 it costs. And that's where I think commit comes in. Okay. So we spend, it's very individualized. It's a bespoke program. It's what you need. We are a lifetime organization. So once you come in, you're in. There's no exiting. Like if you, in 10 years, you decide to make another pivot, we're here. We're going to provide support. On average, we're investing, less than half of what it costs to indoctrinate you into the service, about 20 to 25,000 a veteran. And we do it through internal kind of discussion, reflection. We use a research and evidence-based methodology. And then we invest in, ICF certified coaches. And then we introduce you to people that we know, we want to create citizens, not civilians, right? And we see a very clear difference. Civilians consume, citizens contribute. And we have this population that's coming out of the military that they want to be part of something bigger than themselves. They're primed to really make the world around them and their nation and their state and their communities better. Why are we not harnessing that?
Yeah.
So we see that and we connect them with people where they can have big impact. And that's one of the things that we tell them as a fellowship is we say, hey, look, we're going to invest this in you. We're not giving you this. We're investing it in you. And the expectation is the return on investment is you make impact, positive impact on the community around you, wherever that is. And what's so cool is we have all these elite folks they're starting their other nonprofits for totally different cancer and those with learning disabilities and meditation retreats. But we also have folks that are starting hedge funds and they're making a positive impact on the world around them.
No, that's amazing. So you're helping them, find the community, a new identity and purpose. How do you see yourself today? How would you kind of describe your identity and your purpose?
So it's thank you for asking. What a really great question. Nobody ever asks me that. Mm-hmm. And I actually have an answer for that. So it's funny, if you'd asked me this about 2 years ago, I would have told you, well, I'm Jen's husband and I'm Corbett and Casey and Steve's dad, and I'm Grace, Brendan and Isabel's stepdad. And And I'm not going to say that now, because here's what I'm going to tell you my identity is. I aspire to be kind. I aspire to be curious. I aspire to be innovative. I aspire to be driven. That's who I am. Those other things are roles. And hopefully the things that I aspire to be make me good at those roles. But that's me. And I fail at some of those sometimes. Sometimes I'm lazy, and sometimes I'm not as curious as I should be. But I know that that's what I'm trying for every day. My purpose is not grandiose anymore. What I realized was even my purpose in the military, there were some days when like I was cleaning latrines, right? I was like, support and defend the Constitution. Well, unless you got to go paint rocks or you got to clean a latrine or you got to wax the floor. And so what I've come to believe for myself is my purpose is in every single moment of every single day. I'm not searching for a grandiose purpose. Right now, my purpose is to talk to you about these things. Right? Tonight, my purpose will try to be a good husband. It's in every single moment of every single day. I'm trying to identify what's my purpose in this moment. And that way I can look back and say I've lived a life of purpose.
I like that. That's a great answer. And it sounds like being present is a big component of that. That live in this moment and what you can do right now to make an impact.
Yeah, it's not tomorrow and it's not yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And it's right now. And I can look at you today and tell you that I'm happier than I've ever been in my entire life. And this chapter of my life, my last chapter in the military, was awesome. I had a great time with great people. And this chapter's still better.
Nice.
And I think that's what we want for our fellows.
Yeah. Well, I think that's amazing. And let me say this: thank you for your service. It's a sacrifice, and I think the sacrifice goes beyond, having a deployment, being away from family. It's the sacrifice of your family around you, and it's also the risk I think that you face every day. Even if that day you're not getting shot, there's a possibility that you're facing those types of risks that I'm at work in a comfortable office and I'm not facing those risks. So I think every service person is taking a huge load as a military professional. And I think that's why we want to say thank you for your service, thank you for the family and all the sacrifice that you made. And now helping those kind of returning and finding their purpose. I can't think of really anything better, and there's such a need for it. And I want to kind of pivot too and talk a little bit about leadership, but before we do that, kind of reflecting on that military career and kind of what you've learned. What do you have now as like the biggest lessons that you learned while in the military? What do you think stuck with you, and then now you carry over into being a great citizen?
Yeah, I think the characteristics that I learned from watching great leaders, the characteristics of curiosity, humility, empathy, and loyalty. Like I think about those every single day, and I've written pretty heavily about everybody. If you ask 100 leadership experts, which I don't consider myself a leadership expert, but if you ask 100 leadership experts, the characteristics of a leader, you'll get a million different characteristics. But the one thing that I can say is if you have those four, I think you're going to be great. And quite honestly, you could have a million other ones, but if you're missing one of those four, I think you're really going to be missing it, both as a leader and just as a human. And one of the things that I've kind of pivoted to, I was really big on leadership consulting. And now what I talk about is, can you be a good teammate? Right? Because I think leadership is positional and situational, but the world needs good teammates. And if I'm a good teammate, I'll probably be a good leader. Mm-hmm. And I think if we focused less on what do I need to be as a leader, and more on what do I need to be as a teammate. Knowing that as a teammate, I'm because of my position, I may have different responsibilities. But if I can be a good teammate, well, I'm going to be a good leader. And I saw that over and over in my military career. And I think that's why when I talk to companies, one of the paradoxes that we face is we are thanked for our service, but we're considered low skill and low wage.
Hmm.
And it's thank you for your service. We appreciate we're elevated as heroes. And then this dichotomous, but you don't have experience and you don't know how to do this and you're too rigid and you're too right. I mean, there's this but instead of an and.
Okay.
And it's very, I think that's very confusing for a lot of veterans because we're, thank you for your service and wow, you've done so much. Hey, would you give me a shot at it? Well, you don't have any experience doing this. And I think that really misses the boat for companies. So I talk to companies about, if you hire a veteran, you get a great teammate. Like forget about, people say like, well, you hire a veteran because they'll show up to work on time and they'll do what they're told. That's what good employees do. Like that's not a military thing. When you hire a military person, you probably get somebody that's not completely motivated by money. They're motivated by being part of something that's larger than themselves. They're inspired by mission accomplishment, and they will they will run through walls to accomplish missions. Mm-hmm. They will pick up the skill. I mean, we have a great partnership with AXA, the insurance company. And we just introduced them to a guy, Navy SEAL, doesn't know anything about insurance. And they said, that's okay. We can teach him about insurance. The guy is an absolute superstar.
Yeah.
And what we need is more companies that do that and see like, oh, wait a second. I hear when I was consulting all the time, I heard companies like, well, we want to be more like the military. Okay, well, then you should probably hire some folks who have experience doing that because they don't bring in this draconian process. They're free thinkers. They're thoughtful. They're very, very good at problem solving and not in a, heavy-handed way because they're good teammates.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. There's kind of a disconnect in kind of the stereotype of how we perceive the military, and perhaps it is that the military is very structured. And I don't know if you found this to be true, but a lot of organizations aren't as structured. Things can be kind of disoriented at times and, kind of a mess. And somebody comes in the military there's probably a fear there that they come in and go, man, they call them out on it, right? This is a mess. This isn't structured. Here's what you need to do. I think some of that may also be true. But, creating that opportunity, knowing that they can learn and then bring in these leadership skills, I noticed, in the background there and right behind you, just curious, you have a lot of things behind you there, the arrow and all of the things. Is there anything that you kind of, I guess, really value that you'd be willing to share?
All this stuff is the memories are the value, right? I have like an entire, quite honestly, this is the only place I'm allowed to hang my stuff. My wife won't. She's like, hey, you don't need all this stuff. I will tell you that the one thing that is upstairs is, my tambourine from the Ranger Regiment. I think, I was raised there as a lieutenant before the war and then got to come back as a commander. And I will tell you the NCOs and the people that I worked for and with, that meant a lot to me. But all of this stuff it all is important because it all is a memory. It all oh, hey, I really like that. But what I like about it just being down here, and I don't really blame my wife, is this is kind of a foundation. Mm-hmm. And and I'm building off of that, right? I'm not living in the past, so I'm continuing, like, what else am I going to do? What else can I do? And so it's nice to measure backwards sometimes, which I get to do. And okay, that sets the foundation for what's next.
Yeah.
Right. And I really like that.
Reflect on those memories and then go, yep. And then now I'm going to go create some even more memories. Yeah.
That's it.
That's great.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about leadership. You said the word inspired. And I know you've spoken a lot about the difference and how you perceive the difference between motivation and inspiration from leadership. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I've always considered myself a big dumb animal, but Mimi says I can't say that anymore. But for me, the biggest difference is I can motivate in a negative way, right? Hey, if you don't do this, you're fired. Or if you do this, you'll get a raise. Motivation is completely fear-based, right? So I'm either afraid of the consequence of what happens if I fail, or I'm afraid, even if I succeed, I'm afraid of not getting that thing, that carrot, right? The carrot or the stick is all fear-based incentive. I can't inspire in a negative way. It's impossible. And so, in my battalion, I used to have over the door in Latin, it said, amateurs motivate, professionals inspire. Because I think that I can motivate anyone. I mean, the Latin root of motivation is motive. It means to physically move. And so, like, I can move anything. But inspire, the Latin root of inspiration, is to breathe life or fire into. And that is special. Right? And when I tell people that, like, okay, so which would you rather do, motivate or inspire? He's like, oh, I want to inspire. Okay, so how? How do you inspire? And I believe that, in a world where fear is always prevalent because it's how we're wired, it's what's kept us alive for eons. The way you inspire is you create hope, meaning what I'm asking you to do is worth doing and you're able to do it. And trust, I'm going to be there with you. I'm going to prepare you. I'm going to support you in whatever you need to do. And if you create hope and trust in people, I think you inspire them. I think they will do anything that you've asked them to do. And when you look back at who we think the great leaders in history are, they were inspirational, right? They created hope and trust, whether it's Martin Luther King, right? Think about what he did. He created hope and trust, right? Think of John F. Kennedy and the space program. 63 years before he said, we're going to the moon, the Wright brothers took off. It was crazy what he was asking people to do, but he gave them a sense of hope and a sense of trust. And I think that if you can do that, and I think we focus as leaders, a lot of leaders focus on, oh, I got to get the task done. I don't think that's what leaders should focus on. I think they should figure out, how do I reduce the fear? How do I create courage? I create courage by providing hope and trust, and that's inspiration.
I'm glad you broke that down, because I think a lot of people, if you ask them, they would love to be considered an inspirational leader. And you say, great, how would you go about doing that? And they go, I don't know. So even just breaking that down and saying, a big component of that is hope and trust. And, like you said, being a good teammate. And I think it's hard to be a good leader if you're not also a good follower. And, being there for other people. And it's just an important component. So, no, I appreciate you kind of shedding some light on that. But help me understand, too, the Commit Foundation. How big is it? Where are you? And what do you need from all of us that are listening? How do we support that mission?
So we've served, we started in 2012 and we've served almost 7,000 veterans in that amount of time. Wow. We this next year we'll serve the most that we've ever served in a year, and we'll be just shy of 2,000. As I said, we've now opened it up to spouses. So we're now serving that veteran spouse who's going through their own transformation, right? Because their identity, purpose, and community was given to them too when they became a spouse. And members of the intelligence community, because we think, oh, and our allied forces, so the Five Eyes, and we have some other allies. I think that the way that people can help, we operate on about $3.2 to $3.8 million a year, and that's serving less than 2,000 veterans. I want to serve next year. I want to serve at least 3,000 veterans, and I want to 10x that number by the year 2030. I mean, the goal is that some portion of our program should be provided to every single veteran who's leaving service. I don't care if you've been in 4 years or you've been in 30 years. I think that there's a part of our program that could go to people now that would help them think about who they are and what's important to them. The best way that people can help, I mean, the simple answer is, hey, go to commitfoundation.org and donate. That's the biggest challenge I have. The program is amazing. My team is amazing. The board, Mimi, people like Mimi are amazing. But my biggest challenge is how do, when there's 45,000 veteran service organizations out there, and lots of other important, incredible organizations in the nonprofit world, how do you ask people to like, hey, pick us?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think about us is we're truly an investment, right? So we have identified that every dollar invested into Commit is a $4 return on the U.S. economy. That's through payroll, that's through entrepreneurship. So we actually have done the math and said, no, this really does, we want to talk about making our country great. This really does. Like, this is an investment that really does. And you may not see that investment, in your bank account, but you will see it in your community. I think that, if you're an employer, I think you've got to look at our folks. I think you need to reach out to Commit and say, okay, how do I get my hands on these people? We just did a workshop in Menlo Park. We have Top Gun pilots, we have Navy SEALs, we have Green Berets, we have, helicopter pilots, and, people who figured out the entire supply chain for the Marine Corps. Like, we have these incredible folks. They are going to do nothing but make your organization better the day they step foot. Talk to us about giving these folks a shot.
Okay.
And then I think, for the general population, talk about us. I mean, if I ask the general population, what military nonprofit do they know? It's probably Wounded Warrior Foundation. It's probably Gary Sinise. And those are two great organizations. Like, I can't argue with that. Like, yep, those are two really good organizations. But nobody does what we're doing. Yeah. We're the only ones that are doing it. And we are really trying to invest, not to make up for anything, but to invest in the future. And I look at those other organizations, I think it's an important job. Like, how do you take care of somebody who's really given a lot for the nation? Okay, how do we take this person who's still willing to give a lot to this nation, to the world, and propel them forward?
Mm-hmm. No, it's great. I mean, the purpose, it's powerful. But I get it. No, thanks for sharing that, and hopefully everybody will support what you're doing. I'm excited to be more involved with the organization as well. And kind of to leave us with last couple thoughts here. If you had one piece of advice for maybe someone standing at the edge of a transition, whether it be, professional, but, primarily military, about to, leave something that's, kind of been their identity and they're right on the edge, what's your advice to them? You want them to get involved in the Commit Foundation? What would be your direct advice?
My direct advice would be this. Transition happens to you. I'm going to do a little demonstration here. This cup went through transition. It was full. Now it's empty. That's a transition. But put this cup in my closet, people are going to go, why is that cup in your closet? It still looks like a cup, right? But if I want to take this cup and make it into a pair of sneakers, it has to go through a transformation. Transformation's deliberate. You've got to decide what it wants to be, right? I've got to put it through a process, a deliberate process to get it there. It's work. And I'd say, don't let transition happen to you. Life is transitory, right? I mean, you go to work, you come home from work. That's a transition. You're married, you're not married, you have kids, your kids go off to college. Life is transitory, but true transformation is completely in your hands. So yeah, if you're thinking about a transition that's coming up where on the other side, you probably need to be a different person, not a totally different person, but hey, there's different norms, there's different thoughts, there's different ideas. Being a college parent is different than being a high school parent. It just is, right? You got to let go of some stuff. There's some very deliberate transformation that you've got to go through during those 4 years of college where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't get involved. And quick aside, I was talking to a friend and we were talking about relationships that our children were having. And she said, wait, you don't tell your kids what you think of the relationship? I'm like, it's not my relationship. And I wasn't asked. And they're adults and that's their relationship. It's like, oh my God. And they have younger kids. They're like, well, wait, how do you not tell them? Because none of my business, they're at a certain point. And I think that when you've got to go through a transformation, I think you need an organization, a process, a system that helps you do that.
Yeah. No, that's great. I like the analogy and it's helpful. So what's a question that you wish somebody would ask that they haven't asked yet?
I got to be honest with you, Mike, you asked one of the best questions. Nobody ever asks me about my identity or my purpose. I think I would love for people to ask what's next for veterans when they meet veterans. Because I think that a lot of times we focus them on the past, right? Tell me about, hey, what was it like? Hey, did you go to Iraq? Did you go to Afghanistan? Did you go to Syria? What'd you do there? Did you see that, right? I get it. I understand. That makes sense. And isn't it a really cool follow-up question to go, so what's next? Because their lives aren't in the past.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important question.
Yeah. And so now I would love to ask that question. And then there's that, I think I don't ask that question because what if they said, I have no idea, kind of lost. I don't think before our conversation today, I would have a solution. I'm excited to ask that question and then say, well, there's this Commit Foundation that can help you, give them a resource. So,
and I think the other question is, I think the follow-up question is, would you like help figuring it out?
Yeah.
Because I think that's what we want. I mean, I think this has to be, again, the military says, hey, thanks for your service as well. And then they go, good luck.
Yeah.
And they set you up. You're like, I have more resources than I even understand. I don't know where to put my effort though.
Yeah. Well, this is exciting. I love what you're doing. And hopefully everybody that listens is as excited as I am and wants to be a part of it and support your organization and you and your mission. So thanks so much for your time today. Success speaks the loudest when it's based on values. I think today we heard so many values about even humility and even the vulnerability that it takes to find that next identity. Thanks for listening.